Well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Collision Live. Daniel here, and joined at the desk. A nice surprise that I wasn't expecting. The fires of Mount Doom to my one ruling ring of power, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Oh, not too much. Despite my haggard look, I do have a 5-day-old baby. So
Yes, if he's looking distinguished, a father of two, more
if I
fatherly.
look tired on the outside, it's nothing compared to what I feel on the inside.
Yeah, you look as bad as you feel. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting Sam to be here for the live stream. I'd planned it all to do this solo. It's kind of my chance to finally get the spotlight back and badmouth Sam and correct all of his bad theology and philosophy and arguments. And
Not today.
so last minute had to scramble and change directions. But I think it worked out well because there's some interesting stuff for us to talk about.
Why do your notes say replace Sam on them?
Oh yeah, I need to keep that on the DL. But it's gonna be a good week. This is a lot going on, as we'll get into in a second when we get to the pop culture news. There's a lot of stuff going on in pop culture, some interesting stuff to talk about, and there's Lord of the Rings stuff to talk about. So that's why I'm
fun.
excited. It's because I'm wearing my my Lord of the Rings hoodie. I'm set to do it. But anything else kind of going on this week that other than babies and no sleep? That's your life?
Yeah.
Hashtag
diapers, babies, and no sleep. Yeah, that sums it up.
The dad life. My kids just had their birthday yesterday. So being in a room with like 20-some 6 and 7-year-olds, I probably feel not felt the same.
That gets close to the newborn parenting.
Yeah, so if we're delirious and just talking nonsense, then that's why. But one thing is for joining us, like we do every week, just kind of looking at what's going on in pop culture and kind of as Christians is kind of approaching it from a biblical worldview of kind of just dissecting it and talking about it and celebrating it and talking about the stuff that's just dumb and being excited about the stuff that isn't dumb. There's a lot of stuff that we do. So I encourage you guys, if you're watching live or if you're watching not live, at a playback later, just share your thoughts in the comments section, join the conversation, let us know what you're excited about, what your thoughts are. We'd love to just have a dialogue with you. But the first part of our show, like we start off every show, we have pop culture news. So unlike the last couple of weeks, which we had to scrape the very bottom of the barrel to find any newsy stories, this week was filled with news. I actually had to kind of start weeding out, so we didn't take the whole show just going through stuff that's going on in pop culture. So there's a lot. So I'll go through some of the ones that stood out to me that kind of the most, relevant or just interesting. This has been getting a lot of buzz. I think it's debuted at Sundance, but hasn't come out for public streaming yet. We need to talk about Cosby. It's a documentary kind of getting into what do you do about kind of a fallen hero? How do you separate the art from the artist, which is relevant because that's what we talked about last week, and we even used Cosby as an example. Didn't know they were making this documentary, but just, hey, it shows that we are on top of things here at the Collision Live. The next thing, Mission Impossible 7 and 8 are delayed yet again. Not necessarily super big news, but just hopefully not a sign of that we're kind of doing this again, where COVID and all that stuff is just all these movies that have been delayed that were supposed to come out like 2 years ago still aren't out. But hey, whenever they do come, I'm excited for those. Something I know Sam was excited for, but won't get a chance, unfortunately. The Lizzie McGuire reboot, which when they came out with Disney Plus, they kind of talked about this, relaunching it, eventually canceled it. Hilary Duff, who was on the press tour for something else, is talking about kind of why it was canceled, and apparently it was too racy and adult for Disney Plus, which I have thoughts on. That's this gritty reboot. I don't know if anyone's really wanting to see that. Hey, that's the reason why, so we can be thankful for that. Another thing that I don't know if anyone really wants to see, unless you're a cat person, the Aristocats, announced that they're doing their live action adaptation, following in the new tradition of kind of remaking all these Disney things. It's actually it is an underrated Disney movie, but hey, we see it in live action, real cats, which no one needs more real cat stories. Another story that's kind of been coming up soon, even though we just passed Christmas. Get ready for next Christmas because a Christmas story is in development, which is a sequel to the original kind of classic A Christmas Story. And this will feature the original child actor, who's obviously no longer a child actor. Now he will be the dad, living the dad life, I guess helping his kids have a magical Christmas. I'm not a fan of all these sequels and reboots, but I am a fan of Christmas, so bring that on. Another thing that's been getting a lot of buzz, The Batman, the new kind of upcoming Batman movie, which I think comes out in March, so not very long. Announced the runtime, which is 2 hours and 47 minutes, which is about 47 minutes too long in my books. But hey, that's gonna be it's gonna be big. Two more things coming up or that I noticed. The singer for Meatloaf died. And one, even though he was not necessarily a metal singer, Meatloaf was very influential in the metal genre, so I thought I'd give a shout out. And I learned from my mom just a couple days ago that she grew up listening to Meatloaf, which I just think is awesome. I already thought my mom was cool, and she just keeps getting cooler. And the last thing that, as far as news goes, I was thinking of kind of reboots and stuff. Guillermo del Toro released the first teaser for his stop motion remake of Pinocchio. So this horrifying, monstrous thing of nightmares on the screen is Jiminy Cricket. So to give you kind of an idea of what the aesthetic for this is going to look like. This is on Netflix, so it's not necessarily I don't think like a direct Disney thing. It's just, I guess, public domain Pinocchio. It could be interesting. I like stop motion. I like Del Toro. Pinocchio is a strange kind of drug trip of a movie. So it seems like a good fit. So who knows? But I'll definitely be checking that out. And that is all the stories that we have this week for pop culture news. So what are those? Any of those stand out for you? Interesting or?
Well, it's a lot to take in, but I mean, I did see the or at least part of the trailer for We Need to Talk About Cosby, and I do think that is an important conversation, I think, for our culture to be having, and so it'll just be interesting to see what comes of that. Amen that Lizzie McGuire was canceled or not going to be rebooted. I'm just kind of sick of reboots. I know we've kind of kicked this dead horse a few times, but just come up with some new material. Yeah, and I don't know.
And for me, there's almost like two tiers. There's a reboot of, hey, this is an old thing, let's just remake it, and kind of a new spin.
A remake, yeah.
But then there's hey, here's this innocent child, young property. What if we made it, but it was more cynical and racy and dark and grim and angsty? That would be a good idea. We don't need that. But I do think the Cosby thing was interesting to me just because it is a conversation that even outside of pop culture, it's like historical figures and stuff. It's super relevant, and I think there's not a whole lot of. It's a messy thing. What do you do?
Yeah, well, and I think that's
art and
the few clips that I saw. It was a lot of people just going I'm not sure how to start this conversation or how to talk about him. Because they had such a big he had such a big influence on their careers. And it's so what to say about that? And so I think so a lot of people they were interviewing seemed to really be wrestling with that because it's not an easy you can't deny the effect that show had on pop culture, and it was still he's still a terrible person, so it's complicated.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing that it's kind of a conversation that will always be relevant. I think as Christians, it's one that we need to deal with, and we've had that conversation before at the Collision with some of Zachariah, some of these figures that were beloved that kind of had kind of moral failings and all that stuff. So we'll see. I don't know what angle I'll take on that, but it's definitely interesting. Yeah. And speaking of interesting and things that are important to have conversations about, M&M's, candy,
peanut are the best undisputed champions of the M&M genre.
I think the white chocolate M&M's I feel like don't get enough credit, I guess, as they should. But M&M's
because they're white chocolate.
But gone are the days where candy and food was only relevant to your taste buds. Nowadays, they're also relevant to our kind of culture and society and personal identity. So this story was just funny because I planned to talk about this before I knew Sam was going to be on the episode. And in my mind, I was thinking, okay, Sam's just going to think this is so dumb. Sam's going to have some thoughts on this.
So far, you're not wrong.
Yeah, and so far, but I do think they're beyond sort of just the hot take of, hey, this is ridiculous. There is some interesting conversations to be had about this, especially as Christians. So to give a quick kind of overview, if you're not keeping up with the latest candy appearance and identity news, M&M's, I think Mars is the company that kind of has M&M's. Announced that they were rebranding their characters. You can see them. The differences are subtle, but there are differences. Kind of, these characters feature in commercials and on TV, and they all have their own little identities and personalities, and it's just their way of kind of marketing stuff. So the company just announced that they're kind of changing the look and some of the personalities a bit to kind of better suit 2022. So here's a couple. I'll let them speak for themselves, and then we can kind of get into what I think why this is a relevant story for Christians. But they said the refreshed M&M brand will include a more modern take on the looks of our beloved characters, as well as more nuanced personalities to underscore the importance of self-expression and the power of community through storytelling. Fans will also notice an added emphasis on the ampersand to more prominently demonstrate how the brand aims to bring people together. And later they say their new look will help bring the characters into a more dynamic, progressive world. And then the last thing, which we can get into, is all of the characters will also have their prefixes removed from their names in order to focus on their personalities rather than their gender. And the company said more explaining that, and there's no shortage of hot takes and commentary on this. On this is sort of another example of just our culture now is just shoving all these identity politics and stuff down our throats. You can't even eat candy anymore without having to have your identity challenge or whatever. And on there is a lot of this, like, it is a dumb thing that we're talking about.
Yeah,
M&Ms and
something that
nuanced personalities.
Yeah, I mean, what strikes me is that, like, that first paragraph that you read about self-expression through the power of community and storytelling. This is coming from a candy company, and I think like that alone is interesting. Like, a candy company that makes chocolate candies is concerned about building community through storytelling and all this sort of stuff. One, the power of storytelling, it's everywhere. So if you don't think story matters, then you're not paying attention. And I think this, to sort of the nth degree, shows that this is actually storytelling does matter, regardless of the rest of this story that and the makeover that they did. Storytelling is important, and people care about that.
Yeah, and I think on the, I think the reality is this: the fact that the M&Ms have changed, they're it's not changing the the flow of culture, or society is not going to be radically. A lot of this is this, as we'll get into, is this. It more reflects kind of the priorities and values of culture. I guess what the red M&M acts like and looks like isn't going to change someone's personality per se. I don't know. Maybe it will. Maybe if the red M&M is your hero, but you can definitely see that it's reflecting a lot of where we are as a society. And obviously, I read the one quote about the taking away the I don't know what they're Mr. Red or Mr. Green. I don't know what their names, if they actually had names. But taking away that.
This is the point in the show where we find out that all of these M&M characters are actually characters and have names and stuff. And did anybody know that prior to this makeover?
Yeah, I want a yellow M&M origin story, or but because a lot of the stuff, again, and we've talked about this on the show. I feel as the church, sometimes we kind of group any identity or representation or inclusion, we kind of lump it all into and then put it alongside the worst extreme, over the top, shoving it down, where I don't think it's the fact that a artificial character is more comfortable with his anxiety. Yes, he's an M&M. It's silly, but I don't think that's bad. That's not against Christians. Don't need to get mad that they're changing their shoe color or something. It's some of that stuff I think is fine. That it more represents the one part that is very not subtle is that they are kind of moving away from taking away the prefixes of Mr. and Mrs. And I think even just the way they've changed some of the characters, trying to tone down the real extreme kind of feminine qualities of the characters, and trying to, which obviously is that's not a neutral thing. That is definitely coming out of our of some very influential kind of philosophies and stuff in our culture. But the two things that kind of stood out to me is if you can kind of get beyond the fact that we're talking about society and philosophy and stuff through the lens of colored chocolate candies. If you can get through that, as I was kind of thinking about this, there's kind of two things that I think kind of this story, as silly as it is, reflects. And one is the fixation on identity and the need for affirmation, and this whether the way we do that is always wrong or always good or somewhere in the middle. Like just this need for people to like to know their identity and obsess about what their identity is, and then have that affirmed and see their identity in in their movies and books and the candies that they eat. So you kind of have that side of it, and then the other side of it is this sort of this need today for like corporations and everyone to like stand for something. Like it's not just like, hey, we're M&M company, like we make chocolate and it tastes good. Like that's not enough anymore. It has to be like, we make chocolate, but we also stand to make, for like gender equality and for uniting communities and peace throughout the world. And like there has to this, and you see that all across the board. Like the Twitter now for like these companies, like they never even talk about food. It's all about like either like some kind of activism or some kind of stand or thing that they're doing or, so I don't know. You sort of see those. Like I don't know if you agree with that, but like those two aspects. This story sort of highlights just how ingrained those two kind of elements of our society.
No, I would agree. I think it's probably the perfect summation of where we are in relation to identity in our culture, and also just that you see these companies. Like I don't know that anyone would be able to tell you what like Mars candy stands for. Like, I don't know that anyone would be able to tell you that, like, oh, yeah, M&Ms. When I eat M&Ms, I feel socially just or whatever it is. But now, like, I think, I mean, and you could be cynical about it and say, well, this is a way to kind of make some political hay, while the sun is shining. And it's like, well, we can kind of attach ourselves to this really hot button issue and make what we think is the right call and therefore kind of become a company that stands for X, Y, and Z in this moment in culture. And so I think, it is just sort of a reflection of the sort of reflexes I think that a lot of companies have when some big thing in culture happens. And it's like, well, we need to make sure that we're like on the right side of this so we can keep making money. And if it means pandering to a certain group, then we can do that, and hopefully everything comes out well and the check's still cash. So like like that.
Yeah, if you want the world to be a more peaceful, inclusive, loving place, then head over to your local gas station, pick up a couple bags of M&Ms, and do your duty.
Do your
to
part.
Make the world a better place.
I'm just trying to bring world peace here, just chomping on some peanut M&Ms. But yeah, I think it's sort of. I think it is a great sort of distillation of where we are as a culture, that we're spending this much time on a show about pop culture on chocolate candies and like their need to be relevant, i.e. sell more candy. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of with a lot of these conversations, it's not even necessarily bad desires. Like I think inclusion and a lot of the stuff that they're talking about isn't necessarily things that I guess Christians we need to be. No, we don't want that. We don't want people to be united. We want people to be discord and hate each other. We can.
Where's the hatred candy?
Yeah, I want the candy that's dividing people and judging people. That's Skittles or something. But so I think it's like some of that is like not bad, even if it's just sort of misplaced. But like kind of if I can set like the cynical part aside of myself and like look at this, I think like the positive is that like a lot of these desires, like this is desire, like a society that like is so desperate to find their identity and like be affirmed that like they need their candy to reflect nuanced characters of like who they are, and like this desire to like stand for something beyond just sort of mindless is all stuff that like that Christianity is like a lot of it is like it just seems like society's trying to like go as far down this road as they can to try and achieve what the church is supposed to be when it's kind of functioning as God intended. And there's a verse obviously I don't think they had the green and yellow M&M candies in mind when he was talking about this, but Galatians 3:27-28, one of the most famous verses, where it says, for all who are baptized into Christ have clothed themselves with Christ. There's neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you're all one in Jesus Christ, or in Christ Jesus. This is this sort of like your identity. All these discussions and like trying to find your identity and stuff. Like the gospel is the answer for that. And I think, that as the church and as Christians, we can kind of see the need, the desire, and then just know that we have the answer for that. as dumb as it is, it's like it's definitely there's a harvest to be had.
Well, you can see that there's a desperation for people to find meaning in their life. You know, I think that's ultimately what it reveals, is that like people are just dying to have something to live for, dying to have meaning, to have purpose. And, you know, when you get down to the, you know, the candies that you eat need to reflect that, then I think that shows a great need in our society, and what a great opportunity for the church to step in and actually be the church and share the good news, and the fact that you are created for a purpose, and, you know, to have a relationship with the Lord. So
yeah, and it highlights the beauty of that, of the gospel, of, you know, this messy, this desire, and hey, the gospel gives you an identity that's beyond what M&M candies can do for you. But moving on, again, if you guys are watching this live or watching again, let us know your thoughts on the whole thing. If it's just stupid, let us know that. But if you guys have some thoughts of sort of how the church can kind of read the situation, and
I'm canceling my M&M subscription and switching to Skittles.
Yeah, which are probably not a whole lot healthier for you. But other than that, we can jump into the next section of our show, which is Host Corner. So like I said, we planned this show without knowing that Sam was going to be here. So I thought, even though I did my last week's Host Corner, I feel like we just give the people what they want.
We just didn't have enough medals.
And give more my thoughts. So I thought I would switch it up. No Lord of the Rings, because we're going to get into that in a minute. Yeah. And no heavy metal, which is shocking for those of you that have been watching our show. But I wanted to share about one of my favorite artists. So we can hit the timer and jump into this. So this handsome, strapping young man, this is Thomas Cole. He's a 19th century American painter, and he's a Christian, kind of a very kind of pioneering, influential painter as far as like American art goes. But he combines a lot of the stuff that I just love about kind of art. He mostly did kind of landscape pictures, and his paintings are beautiful, very kind of romantic in what he does, which I'm a sucker for kind of romanticism and some of that, but also just a Christian, kind of use a lot of his paintings to as stories and kind of allegories. Probably his most famous, which is on the screen now, was called A Course of Empire. It's 5 landscape images that are all like the same landscape, but kind of capturing a different moment in time throughout history. And you kind of just see how the lands change, how the kind of civilization kind of was built and grew and prospered, and then eventually kind of decayed into just ruins. Which there's just a lot of power to that. There's a lot of interesting stuff to pull from that. We can throw real quick the next one up. Probably my favorite paintings that he's done. I actually have these 4 paintings on the wall of my library. This is Voyage of Life, kind of telling kind of 4 seasons, 4 stages of life growing up, and kind of our human response to or interaction with like God and the heavens, and just filled with a lot of symbolism and allegory. So it's powerful. I think I love storytelling art. If you've never checked him out, if you've never heard of him, Google him and look at some of his images, because they are awesome. Are you familiar with this? I know you've seen it because I have these in my...
Yeah, I've seen them at your office, and I think that's awesome that you bring him up, and I just think that's cool when you can take art and it can be something beyond just, you know, a pretty picture. And so I always like that sort of the symbolism and all that kind of stuff in art. So
yeah, and it's not just what I love about it, and then we'll move on to the next thing, but what I love about it is like so much Christian art now that feels like the need to like teach. Like it's so kind of kitschy and like over the top, and it's just very like there's no depth to it. Where like these paintings, you know, like I have them in my wall. I see them every day, and like there's so many details that you can like. It's like a good book. Like you can come to them and see different things, and yet you have to think about it and like do a little work to. Not just like, you know, a very like cartoony Jesus like giving you a hug and like, you know.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great strengths of good artwork is that you can keep coming back to it and not really get tired of it or become sort of desensitized to a particular painting. And so I think it's neat, especially that style of art that you can sort of keep coming back and not really ever get tired of seeing new things or, you know, understanding it in a more complex way. So
yeah, it's on my bucket list. I think these are housed in Washington, which I know my wife and I have been wanting to get away to and go see some of those museums. So maybe one day I will be able to see that. Another thing that I want to see and will see soon, in September 2nd to be precise, is the new Lord of the Rings TV show. And if you guys have followed the show at all or followed me on Twitter or anything and thought that they were going to announce more Lord of the Rings show content and we weren't going to spend a whole topic on our show talking about it, then you have not been paying attention because that's my jam. Lord of the Rings is my thing. I love it. I'm super excited, slightly fearful for this upcoming show. See what Amazon does with my beloved Tolkien property. But they kind of announced this thing's been announced for a while, but they finally started to kind of get the rollout of information and stuff. And the big thing, they released a video, and in the video they announced the title of the show, which is The Lord of the Rings: The Rings of Power. And maybe we can just talk about that before we get into like the video and some of the details, because I don't know if I know sometimes Monty.
What a great metal band, The Rings of Power.
I know that would be a good like symphonic.
You're welcome.
Power metal band, which maybe I will put auditions out for, and we'll start that. I know Monty sometimes watches the show, and I know he was complaining about this title on Twitter, and I was trying to inform him that he's wrong. So if you're on here, Monty,
you're still wrong.
The Lord of the Rings. The Rings Strike Back. Okay, so you're still not a fan of the thing. What do you think of the title? 'Cause I think like, Monty's issue with it is that it's a mouthful. Like, having the Lord of the Rings and then having like the Rings of Power, like the actual title.
I mean, I think it's going to be referred to as the Rings of Power, right? Like, so I don't think anyone's going to be so. Have you seen the latest episode of the Lord of the Rings of Power yet? I think people are just probably going to shorten that to the Rings of Power, but everyone will know that that's the Lord of the Rings. And so I think it's probably more of a technicality. Like, it's the Lord of the Rings of Power, but no one's going to say the whole thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like all the standalone Star Wars movies have like a Star Wars story. But like no one ever in the history of our planet have ever actually referred to it.
I think it's more of a, I would imagine.
Rogue One, colon, a Star Wars story. Like
I would imagine it's more of a branding thing. Like, we need to make sure, I mean, again, not that people would watch this and be like, oh, is this like that other Lord of the Rings? I think it's probably like brand continuity or something. I don't know. Like,
I think you need the title to come up when you're searching for things in Google and for ads. And I think just making it clear that, because the Rings of Power can be like, what's like Shang-Chi, the Marvel movie, and like what is like the 10 Rings, or like there's like the rings could be a lot of things. Like it's not necessarily specifically Lord of the Rings. I think having that in there is fine. But yeah, everyone's gonna refer to it as Rings of Power, which is a killer title and a very Tolkien title. Like that's something that he would write a book, The Rings of Power.
Yeah,
and he referred to that. But kind of to announce the title, they released this really killer, awesome video. Just sort of teasing, they're reading the ring poem about 9 to the mortal men doomed to die and all that stuff, and kind of showing all this stuff moving. Like, so they didn't show any like footage of it, but this video is this looks awesome. But then they released like the behind the scenes of it, and they did it. Like, it's not CGI like in some computer. Like, they're actually like pouring like lava and like shooting water, and like it's crazy.
Yeah, it's like I didn't know that because I think like 5 minutes after the trailer was released that you sent me both of those clips, like both the behind the scenes and also the title sequence, which I think we're playing now on the screen, which is just ridiculously epic. And it could easily have been, and I would have thought this was CGI, just because like who does that? But the Lord of the Rings, that's who does that. And I think that's, I'm a sucker for practical effects. And I think anytime that you can use practical effects to accomplish something in a movie, I just think that's so awesome. And
it gives me hope too, because like the reality is like this show will probably have more special effects than like any show in the history of television. Like, they're spending billions of dollars on this. Like, they're gonna use tons. It's like Mandalorian, all these shows that are highlighted for it. They use so much practical effects. Like, they also use tons of special effects. But the fact that like just to reveal the title that they actually like did this level of detail. And I don't want to spoil like what happens in the show, because I know the history, and like there's little details even in that, like the way they use the water and stuff, that like very much indicates like what's happening. And like there's so much detail in this video that like it gives me a little ray of hope that like they're taking this seriously. Like, they're not gonna just.
Well, and like the original trilogy, like the movies were so like insane on their scale. Like I don't know that there had ever been movies produced at that scale, and like Hobbiton down in New Zealand, and like all these places that were like where they filmed were not all of them, but most of them were like real places, and there seemed to be a lot of emphasis on like the actual locations and like practical effects and stuff. And so I'm always a big fan of movies that do that, and I feel like it's fitting for Lord of the Rings to do that as well, because that just makes it all the more hardcore.
Yeah, and it's kind of more like earthy and like tangible, which is so much of like what the stories are about. Two other things kind of about this show and then we can just talk maybe more generally, and then we can be done for our episode. But they did release like the rating for this, and I know we like episodes and episodes like over a year ago probably when they first announced this. I don't know if you remember, like the story came out where they had hired like an intimacy consultant or something.
Oh yeah.
And everyone freaked out about like because like obviously any show that comes out now that's fantasy is like the people want. I think even like the Amazon guys like we need our Game of Thrones, like meaning like a big successful fantasy. Everything has to get compared to, even if it has no similarities really to it. So this is sort of this fear of like, oh no, like are they gonna take how does like a modern society take this like a story that was even like old fashioned for its time,
70 years ago.
Like, do we need to now like this is Lord of the Rings, but now we have like
but it's sexier.
Yeah, it's sexier. We have naked elves now, and like you have dwarf nudity, and like are they gonna do that? And like so the rating came out, and it indicates that like no, this is not. I forget, it's like maybe PG-13 or whatever it is, but it gets the TV equivalent.
Yeah.
Like, so it seems like that at least that fear was
unfounded.
Much to do about nothing. Which really is my concern. Like I'm not as like obviously I'm super excited for this show. I'm not like a super purist that like if they change anything about the timeline or like adapt it, then like how dare they? For me, it's more just like this is like
they've obviously never read the book.
Yeah, what the hobbits don't show up till the third age. Don't you guys know anything? But like for me, like whatever. I understand they got to change some of that stuff for it, but like. But for me, it's like the stories are such like an embodiment of like Christian virtue and like all that this, like the way that he wrote it, that like that's the part that concerns me more. That how does sort of a non-Christian kind of corporation make this show in a modern progressive society? Like are they gonna just like kind of defile what Tolkien himself would have done, like and try and modernize it? Or and I guess we don't have answers to that. But that for me, that is still, it's like the M&M story. Like, are we gonna have to now? This is more for a modern progressive world. We have Lord of the Rings. So who knows for that? As far as just like the story, I don't want to get into all the details. Although I could.
Although I was gonna say.
But basically,
not for not wanting to.
Yeah, not for not. We'll do that when the camera goes off. I will Tolkien-splain to Sam for a bit, but. So they released kind of like a synopsis for this thing, and basically it's the Second Age, which if you imagine like the prologue of like the movies where they throw down Sauron and cut his finger off, like that would be like the last moment of the show, like that's when the Second Age ends and the New Age begins, and then the age kind of starts with like the making the rings. But there's a lot of this interesting stuff in the Second Age, and I think I shared, maybe I was on my soapbox a while ago, one of my host corner, but like where people like see the Lord of the Rings as like overly simplistic morality and not nuanced, like really, like, especially this timeline, like is very much not that. Like this is more like almost Shakespearean tragedy. Like this characters are all awful, they're all fallen, they're all selfish. Like there's tons of interesting stuff. But what do you think of as far as like coming from the show? Like basically this is like Sauron's origin story is a way to think of it. Like it's like his rise to power the first time.
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see like because like just based on the books, all these things that led up to sort of the Lord of the Rings. But I think it'll be cool to kind of see that play out if that's how they're gonna do the show. So I'm excited about it. And if the title trailer is anything to go by, then I think it's gonna be a really, really good show.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Lord of the Rings is like half the characters are immortal. So you have a lot of the characters from like the books and from the like Galadriel, and some of those people are all still around in this age, still prominent characters. So we're gonna see their, I guess, younger versions. But I'm excited. Obviously, we could do the whole show on this. Maybe before the show comes out, I'll do some videos and stuff, just geeking out. For those of you that don't want to subject yourself to that, but let us know if you guys are excited for the show. Anything about this awesome teaser that gets you more excited, or are you worried that Amazon's just going to make this thing kind of take away all the Christian elements and just try and make it more modern? So we'll see. But so this week at the Collision, I got actually quite a bit going on. I posted a new one that I wrote. It was posted yesterday, Expanding Eden, which is sort of looking at the Garden of Eden, which I'm endlessly fascinated about that story and kind of the implications of that, and just sort of what does it mean to kind of begin our human existence in a garden and learn how to cultivate the earth and care for the earth, and how can we kind of apply that to just culture today and cultivate the world that God put us in. So I encourage you to check that out. I think I'm biased. I think it's a pretty good article. And then also an article, if you haven't checked it out yet, we did 5 classic novels that I think every Christian should read. This article has been getting a lot of traction. I'd love to hear from you guys any books you would disagree with, agree with, or would add to the list of books that you think Christians would benefit from reading. So I encourage you to check that out. But any other, I know you're mostly in a
fog,
newborn,
but
land, but anything else kind of going on this week with?
No, I don't. I mean, just surviving and sleeping as much as possible, which is not much.
Yeah,
which is half of what I normally sleep, probably.
Yeah, in 2-hour increments before the baby decides
exactly it's time to eat again.
Yeah, babies are selfish. They only care about themselves and eating and pooping and all that kind of stuff.
All they do is cry. It's like, well, come on, just use your vocabulary already.
Yeah, but hey, at least God made them cute.
That's true.
So it tides you over till they can actually start doing stuff for themselves. But thanks again for joining us once again for the Collision Live. I don't know what the plan is next week, if Sam will be able to join us again, or if I'll have my opportunity to badmouth him finally and talk behind his back. But either way, we will
tune in to find out.
Tune in to find out. But either way, we will be back next week in some shape or form. So hope you'll join us next Tuesday at 12. Encourage you guys, if you haven't done so, subscribe to our channel, like the page, like the video, all that stuff you know to do, and just sort of join with what we're doing here at the Collision. But most of all, guys, stay safe and continue to collide with the world for Christ.